Not quite as much as you though, but I feel like I'm getting there. Hello and welcome back to the latest Forza Italian Football Podcast. As ever, I'm your host Connor Clancy, and I've got my two best friends joining me again. Kev Pogzelski's here. Kev, hello.
Hi, Connor.
That was, for anyone listening, a poor attempt at a joke that he attempted off air, and it sunk just as deep as it did this time. Vito, you're here to help me through this next hour or so with the relic, Kev. Hello.
Yeah, well, we're here now, here to help, and should be a good chat too. You know, a lot of fun stuff happened this weekend. So
I feel like I'm missing my black headphones.
Mine are actually blue.
Kev. Oh, okay. So, well, I'm missing my headphones. I need a. Yeah, it's like sitting in front of two air pilots.
Are you okay, Kev?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Are you all right? Have you calmed down there?
I'm good, yeah.
Right, well, don't get too calm because we're about to talk about the Derby della Madonnina, the second of the season. And oh my God, what a game it was. AC Milan, of course, led 2-0 at halftime. Inter were, I think it's fair to say, embarrassing in the first half, but Inter came out in the second half and they turned it on their head and they scored 4 uncontested goals and won 4-2. Kev, where to begin?
Yeah, where to begin? It was brilliant game, obviously. I think we have had some really, really good Milan derbies, you know, even within the last decade where neither side have been too successful. But this time it had that edge because there was clearly something riding on it. Verona beating Juventus obviously helped that. Milan had very little to lose, whereas Inter kind of had all the pressure on them. And I don't want to take too much away from Milan because they looked far more positive than they have been in recent games. But Inter looked nervous. You know, and I kind of, after Daniele Pedelli flapped at the first goal, kind of put that a little bit down to Handanovic's absence. I think we underestimate the role he plays in the Inter side. But yeah, they looked nervous, and you got to think that Conte has got into them at half time because they came out a different side.
They did look nervous, didn't they? And I think, all right, granted, they were missing their goalkeeper and captain, but if you collapse to that extent based on your goalkeeper missing, I think it says a lot about the team. And Vito, I know we'll get onto some positives in a little bit, and I know they turned things around with an incredible second half performance, but Inter were horrid in that first half, and surely questions still need to be asked that they could collapse in that fashion in their biggest game of the season.
They looked like they were either scared or they weren't trying hard enough in that first half. There wasn't that typical Antonio Conte style aggression that you see from his teams. They were very well pegged back, and AC Milan had so much space to pass the ball around. For instance, the likes of Benacer and Çalhanoğlu had a lot of room to pass the ball in midfield. Kessie had enough time to control the ball and play basic passes, and that's probably one thing he's been criticised for since joining AC Milan from Atalanta, that his technique is not up to scratch. And then on the left side in particular, the likes of Theo Hernandez and Ante Rebic had plenty of room to run riot. So very concerning from that perspective from Inter to give AC Milan that freedom. And they were attacking with this great verve and confidence in the first 45 minutes, and just the Nerazzurri didn't look like they were able to react in the best way possible until after half time.
No, and in that first half, Kevin, it did look like Milan were the team going for the Scudetto and Inter were the middling team with nothing riding on the game. And I don't know, am I being a bit too harsh on Inter by saying that there are still big questions about this team?
I think we're being a little bit harsh when you're sort of putting it in the context of their season as a whole. This was easily their worst first half performance of the season. I can't recall one, not certainly in recent months, that I remember being this bad. The misplaced passes, the lack of positivity going forward. I was never a big fan of Candreva, and he kind of went back to what I sort of recall him being. The reasons he used to frustrate me, that it would be get the ball out wide to him and it would be almost an aimless cross, or he wouldn't even get the cross in because it would hit the first man. Theo Hernandez closing him down a lot. Whereas we've seen a little bit more from him this year. It was just an appalling first 45 minutes, and we probably shouldn't be too negative because overall they're challenging. They're giving us a Scudetto race.
But did Inter not in the second half? Kev, I'll stick with you. Just do what you would have expected from them. Given it's a derby, given how much was riding on it, and given how much better their team is than Milan's. And I know they scored 2 goals in quick succession, and full credit for that, but they shouldn't have taken 45 minutes to actually get into the game.
I think there was a couple of points in the first half where Lukaku just turned Romagnoli far too easily and just powered away and then kind of overhit the ball a little. Alexis Sanchez was, out of all of the Inter players, sort of lively in the first period. It was almost kind of they dragged everybody else along with them as well in the second half. And we saw Brozovic obviously break towards the edge of the box to smash home that ball. Vicino was vastly improved in the second half because he was doing very little in the first. It was almost exactly the reason why I don't see him sort of remaining into too long if they improve their midfield options, because he just does so many of the basic things poorly. Yet he was the one who obviously popped up with the was the equaliser. Yes,
it was.
The equaliser.
But Vito, looking at this, right? Trying to put a positive slant on it for Inter. Not that they need that much of a twist. They just beat Milan 4-2 in the derby. But Marcelo Brozovic, Matthias Vecino, Stefan de Vrij and Romelu Lukaku all scored. 4 different goal scorers in a derby that in recent seasons had been so defined by Mauro Icardi being the one to make the difference for Inter. And is that one of the signs of the progress of this Inter team, that they've now got so many players who can step up for them, whereas before they were just so reliant on their striker?
I certainly think so. Having this spread in goal scorers means that they don't have to be overly dependent on 1 or 2 players. As you just mentioned, there was that dependence on goals on Icardi when he was at the club. But now with Conte, he wants more contribution from all 11 starters or all 11 players that are featuring on the pitch. This way, with the goals coming from midfielders as well, it means that there isn't too much dependence on Lukaku, who has still scored enough goals already, and he's got about 17 now. Yeah, 17 goals. So that's an excellent first season from him. Lautaro, before he got suspended, was on 11. But when you have the other players chipping in here and there, it just makes it hard for the opposition teams to stop, because they have guys who will bang it in. And you can see with the Brozovic and Vecino goals that they were coming from deep midfield positions, and you can't always track the strikers, and that's a big plus for a team that wants to win trophies.
I think Romelu Lukaku, Kev, fully deserved his goal. It took him until stoppage time to get it, but he had been quite good throughout the game, and in the end he produced one of the most iconic celebrations you're likely to remember.
Yeah, he won't do it very often though, as he picks up a booking. With his scoring ratio, that would probably get him at least 2 or 3 bans every season. Yeah. If he did it every goal. But yeah, we discussed this on social media earlier today. It will no doubt become part of Inter choreography in the coming years, probably after Lukaku has long left. The performance he gave, as I say, sort of roughing up the Milan defence and just being direct, with that style that he's got, that such powerful speed. I was wondering if he would probably, even if Inter didn't win the league, be considered the player of the year.
I think he's got to be a contender, right? I remember speaking to a colleague. She doesn't work for FIF, but she's a colleague who writes about Italian football, and we were talking around just before things broke up for Christmas, I think it was my last game. I was at Sassuolo Napoli, and we were messaging about who the player of the season was so far. And I found it really difficult to actually look beyond Lukaku and Lautaro, because they were just so good. And Lukaku's kept going. Lautaro's been held back by a suspension, of course. But yeah, I think irrespective of what happens, him and Ciro Immobile obviously is a real front runner for that as well, given what he's doing at Lazio. But yeah, Lukaku's been great. And I think I said last week, he's just so likable as well. And it is great to see. But I think that, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but that celebration, and it was quite a powerful image, right? Him standing there holding the corner flag with his shirt on, as if he owns the San Siro, he owns Milan. And then for him to tweet, I think it was this on Monday morning or else late on Sunday night, there's a new king in town. I mean, that could be pointed both at Icardi and at Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And I just think the tide, it has turned in Milan. Inter are definitely the dominant team there now, but is it turning in Italy as well? Is this one of those moments, Vita, that we look back at the end of the season and think that was one of the big games where Inter took a big step towards the title?
I definitely see it as a season-defining game, because although Milan have been disappointing this season, to say the least, Inter have really looked the goods so far. And, it's these kind of games where you're down a lead, you're trailing, and then you're able to overcome this deficit and just turn things around. And that's one of the things about the best teams, that even when the circumstances are against them, they just have this know-how and determination to just turn things around. And in this particular game, the Nerazzurri did show that.
Yeah, Kev, you touched on Samuel Andanovic's absence. How big was it for Inter? Because Badelli was a joke in the first half.
Yeah, Badelli sort of has his issues. I obviously looked this up because I'm writing a piece for the site, and Badelli's only a year younger than Handanovic. Yet the longest time he spent anywhere is Torino. I think he got 100 league games there or thereabouts. I think it was maybe even bang on. And obviously he had that awful mistake in him, which we knew we joked before the game that could be an issue. And he flapped terribly when there was no real need to flap. I'll give a little bit of credit that there was an Inter defender that could have hooked the ball away, but he still made a bit of a mess of that. And then I think he could have done better with the Ibrahimovic header. He
absolutely should have.
And I say, when it was even before they conceded, he came for to punch a ball, and it hit his wrist rather than his fist, and it wasn't a particularly difficult. He had a sort of jump above a couple of other players, but not sort of over them. And at such an early stage in the game, and with Vito just taking the positive points from the game to say that this could sort of be a catalyst for Inter to kick on. Hopefully that is the case, and the issue with Padelli being in goal is why they look so nervous, because that was only my real negative regarding whether they can stay in this title race, is if their reaction to their first real test, if you like, or big game, is to look that nervous, then I'm starting to worry my prediction won't come. My before the season prediction won't come true. But yeah, let's hope it's down to Badelli, because he'd certainly give me concerns if I was playing in front of him.
Yeah, I think if Badelli has to play 5 games in a season, it severely reduces Inter's chances of winning the league. What's your piece about for the listeners?
Well, it's how Padelli's arrival in that game kind of symbolised how important Handanovic is to Inter, but also how important he's been for nearly a decade, and probably underrated in some quarters. And you forget his time at Udinese, and he's arguably one of the best keepers that Serie A has seen in the last 2 decades. Yet he's 35. He could walk away with not a single trophy to his name, which I just find astonishing when the likes of Barcelona and Manchester United over the years have been rumoured to have being after him. You know, that show of loyalty to the club should be lauded, and that's hopefully what I'll do in my piece.
Yeah, well, do head over, listeners, to ForzaItalianFootball.com. Tuesday morning, that piece will be up, so have a read of it and everything else I've written from the Frankie and the Tardini this weekend as well. So we've got plenty up there. Looking over at Milan, then, Vito, Hakan Çalhanoğlu kind of set the tempo for the first half with that shot that crashed off the post, the first of 3 attempts that hit the woodwork on the night. And he looked okay. Is Suso leaving exactly what he needed to become the player that Milan thought they were signing?
Suso leaving helped, but I also think that this change in formation has helped the situation too. The 4-3-3 wasn't working with the players they had, and it was surprising that AC Milan were able to be as high as they were last season under Gennaro Gattuso with that formation, because it felt like he was just trying to, flick the proverbial excrement on the wall and hope that it would stick. But this time around, he played behind Ibrahimovic in the derby, and I think it was far more beneficial for his game. Not only that, Çalhanoğlu plays his best football when he is playing behind a striker or strikers. So hopefully for him, this change in formation helps him improve his performances while he's at the club.
Speaking of Ibrahimovic, Kev, oldest goal scorer ever in the Milan Derby. I mean, it's hard to deny the impact he's had. He's 38 years old, and not just turned 38. He's 38 and 129 days at the time he scored. I mean, he's getting on, but he's made a big difference. That's the first game Milan have lost since he's returned.
Yeah, I've kind of sort of talked down the influence he's had there, but he was unbeaten until that point. And although you could argue he hadn't had too much of an impact apart from the goal and the assist, that's what a striker's there for. That's exactly what he's there for.
I mean, that's not bad, is it? It's
no, exactly.
Scoring and assisting.
I think because of the everything that goes around the image of Zlatan, I think we kind of expect him to be a little bit more. People forget that he is now 38, so they kind of they believe the hype that he's a 38-year-old, but he's as fit as a 25-year-old, and that just isn't the case. However fit you are, when you get into your mid-30s, which we all know I have, things just don't move as quickly as you'd like them to. But to still have that impact at the highest level in professional football is amazing.
No, he is a machine, and full credit to him. I've always been a big fan of his, and that remains to be true. Anyway, Inter are now technically top, even though they're not, because they're behind on head-to-head, but head-to-head doesn't come into things until everyone has played each other twice. But they are top. They lead Juventus, and the reason that is because, well, Vito, Juventus went up the road to Hellas Verona, and they came up against the immovable force that is Fabio Borini and Gianpaolo Pazzini, and despite Cristiano Ronaldo putting them 1-0 up, Juve lost.
Yeah, it's incredible to see Juventus lose, and also to a team like Hellas Verona, who on paper are probably one of the weakest squads in the league, especially since they had just come up from Serie B. Hellas Verona, though, have been one of the surprise packets of the season, and Hellas Verona deserve credit for the win. They stuck to the guns. Maras Kumbula, the young defender, had a goal disallowed in the first half for offside, but they didn't take it to heart or just collapse mentally. Even once Ronaldo scored that goal, they just stuck to the game, belief in the philosophy, and yeah, it's incredible. Although Borini's goal was helped by mistakes from Bentancur and Pjanic, I think these smaller provincial clubs like Hellas Verona suit a guy like Borini, and he worked incredibly hard in this game. And then Pazzini, No, he's going to be 36 this year, but he still provides that Jello Blue side with valuable experience and just the way he struck that penalty, just pure power and precision. Just wonderful stuff on his part.
Kev, is Gianpaolo Pazzini the best attacking player in Serie A who is 35 years old?
35 years old or more, are you?
No, 35 years old. Say yes.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, because I'm now trying to work out who else is 35.
He's better than Cristiano Ronaldo. Kev Pogzelski slapped.
Oh, of course, yes, he
Cristiano
just
Ronaldo.
had a birthday.
Yeah, he has. He's just had his 35th birthday, but Pazzo is better than him, apparently, according to you.
Well, Cristiano's fitter as a physical specimen. I'll get that clear. I was a little surprised to see them call for Pazzini from the bench to, I joked on Twitter that it was, to come off and score the winner, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, well, we all know there is a 37-year-old striker in Serie A who's better than not only the two of those, but also everyone older and younger than him in world football. But no, Juve, right, because it's not all going well there. I mean, there are reports, read into this what you will, but The Sun have reported that Aaron Ramsey might be on his way out this summer. I'm not quite sure what I make of that, to be honest, given the source. But there's also reports from La Repubblica over here who don't exactly delve into rumors all that much, that Juve are considering getting rid of Maurizio Sarri, Vito, and replacing him with a man who is still on their payroll in Massimiliano Allegri.
I think it would be a backward step if they did bring back Allegri. I really hope that this La Repubblica rumor is nothing more than that, and that it's just a hoax. But you've brought in Sarri to bring in a different style and different ideas. And I've mentioned a few times, whether it be here on the pod or on social media, that the midfield's not really suited for Sarrismo or Sarri ball. Allegri, to me, would just cement domestic dominance once again. And I have said numerous times, Juventus have to aim for the Champions League. And they will never win the Champions League with Massimiliano Allegri. I will go as far as to say Massimiliano Allegri will never win the Champions League. And that's the same for the Spanish coach who was just sacked by Barcelona, Ernesto Valverde. Too conservative for the modern game. You can't just go 1 or 2-0 up and just show mercy on the opponent. If the Agnelli family want to be happy with the Scudetto and aim for that 4th star, that's fine. But if you really want a 3rd European Cup or Champions League, you can't bring back Allegri. To me, I think he would be a step backward. Juventus need to refreshen the squad anyway, because they do have a few veterans. It's not just Ronaldo at 35. There are a few others too. And I do think also Allegri himself, I think he could do with a new challenge and go to either another Italian club or even coach in a different league and see what the atmosphere is like, experience different pressures and trying to coach in different environments.
It is strange, isn't it? Because it's no secret that Allegri wants to coach in the Premier League. I mean, he's been learning English for years in order to do exactly that. But I don't know. Maurizio Sarri is one thing. I know it was a European trophy last season at Chelsea, but I'm not quite sure he's the man either. But Kev, what do you make of this whole thing? It's a little bit strange, isn't it? Because Sarri coming in, kind of, I don't know. I just assumed it was almost like a stepping stone for them to try and get Guardiola and to put some things in place before transitioning to like the ultimate model of that kind. But going to Allegri would surely be them kind of tearing up everything they've done this season.
The move for Sarri certainly felt like there was a shift in philosophy, certainly within the power brokers at the club. It clearly hasn't been working. I think this weekend's game, plenty can see that as a sort of a smash and grab from Verona, but the reality is that they were probably the better side for the majority of the game. Juventus have also in recent years kind of gone down this route of they had so much success picking Pogba up so cheap and other players that didn't leave for huge sums like Andrea Pirlo, but they've offloaded Emre Can after picking him up. They seem to have done the same with Rabiot and Ramsey. And then you've got a scenario where you've got too many bodies in. If they could have shipped more out in the summer, maybe that would have freed up some space for actual players that Sarri would have wanted to suit his style. There were reports in the UK about Jorginho from Chelsea also being kind of tapped up. I don't know if I agree with Juventus and Allegri together would never win the European Cup or the Champions League, like Vito, because I think in 2015, I'll be getting my years wrong, but they faced an extremely good Barcelona side, and I think that possibly preyed on their minds when they met Real Madrid in Cardiff a couple of years later. I think, depending on how badly Juve think it's going this year, and the fact that Allegri's still on their payroll, it's whether they would be quite clear that he's coming in to see out the rest of the season. If they think it's going so badly with Sarri and they're worried about Europe and winning the Italian title, because I don't think if I was a Juventus fan, I would be that against that, providing they were sort of open with it. And it's, it is kind of a trend that we see in Italian football, and even let's say Bayern Munich, when they did it with Jupp Heynckes, they got him in to sort of steady the ship, and then he was there for a little while, but they were very open about he was going to be finished, and then they even tried to go back to him this year when they offloaded their coach.
Yeah, you usually see it when things are going terribly wrong, though. Juve topped their group in the Champions League, a group that consisted of Atletico Madrid as well, and now they are still joint top of Serie A with a better head-to-head advantage over the team they are level on points with. I just think it's such a strange decision. Like, why appoint Sarri in the first place if 6 months down the line you're going to go back to Allegri? It just seems like there's not a lot of joint-up thinking happening there, which is not something you've ever been able to say about Juventus, particularly in the last 8 years. Everything has happened for a very clear reason, and they've made decisions that have been well thought out, and they've stuck to their guns and succeeded because of it. I just don't understand it. Anyway, nothing's happened yet, so we don't know. We might be wasting our time talking about this. The other team who are very much in the title race, I don't care what Alistair McKenzie says, are Lazio. They came up here to Parma and they left with a 1-0 win. And Kev, they found a different way to win. They usually win late. This time they scored in the 41st minute, and they rubbed their luck. Parma probably should have been given 2 penalties. They were given neither, and Lazio left with the points.
Yeah, the penalty call at the end when can't remember who it was, but it was Cornelius that got, there was a clear tug on his shirt, and I was watching the game and thought, well, I was quite astonished that they hadn't called it back. There was a stoppage in play that they could have, reviewed it on the VAR, and it's the sort of decision that, had it been Juventus, everybody'd be crying that there was some sort of conspiracy. I know Alistair, I saw before the game, was saying about the amount of changes that Lazio had, and that it was a real test of their strength and depth. And I think it proved very much that. It was hard fought. Parma had a lot of the ball. Parma were positive going forward. Was certainly the better side. It was really against the run of play that Caicedo sort of put them in the lead.
Yeah, well, they had their chances, Lazio, in the first half, and then they probably should have been ahead early on. Luis Alberto, Lucas Leiva, Ciro Immobile, and Caicedo himself all missed chances, but once they got ahead, Parma really came into things in the second half, and you could probably say Parma bossed the second half, especially when Kulusevski came on. He injected a lot of life into things, and he made one really poor decision on a break late on, but then maybe 45 seconds later, he almost picked out the top corner with what would have been a really, really good goal. But it's a strange one to analyse, because Lazio got the points, they got the win. Their celebrations afterwards, by the way, the fans and the players said a lot to me. they went down beneath the Curva Sud where their fans were, and they were jumping around, singing, celebrating. It was like the type of celebrations you see if a club just make it to a cup final or they win something. And it really showed me that this team seemed to believe not only that they're able to compete with anyone, but that they're able to challenge Vito for the Scudetto and go the distance in the next 3 months.
I was originally skeptical about it, but now I'm starting to believe that Lazio could be a contender for the title. In this particular game, I thought Parma were probably unfortunate not to get at least a point because of some of the chances they had. And also there was that situation with Cornelius. So I think D'Aversa and the rest of his players, they deserve to feel aggrieved. That being said, I think Lazio to win away, and they did not win comprehensively this time. I think that's a big positive for them, because if you can win those games where you do struggle and you're not as prolific as you have been in previous games, it goes to show that you can deal with a variety of circumstances and that you don't have to win by playing one way. And for title winning teams, I think that's extremely important, that you can't just win playing the one type of football. Lazio have showed in particular this season that whether it's scoring goals early in games or scoring goals late or scoring a bucket load of goals like they did against SPAL in the previous round, that, you know, they are a team that's ready to surprise Serie A and perhaps even get that third Scudetto.
Yeah, Lazio, one of the teams I've written about, so head over to the website and have a read of that. But Kev, we'll hear Alistair's renewed but not updated, I suppose, thoughts in just a little bit. But are they in the title race? Yes or no?
Yeah, definitely.
Right, easy. I agree. 1 point off top after 33 or 23 games says a lot. Actually, there is an interesting little stat, which is this is the closest title race in Serie A in 18 years. Of course, the Derby d'Italia pair and aside from the capital are involved. 18 years ago, 2001-2, same situation. Juve were top, and Inter and Roma were joining them. That season ended with Juve winning the league, 1 point ahead of Roma, who were in turn 1 point ahead of Inter. So maybe that's a precedent that will be followed. Juve win the league by a point over Lazio, and Lazio finish a point ahead of Inter. Who knows? But it's definitely shaping up to be quite exciting. Speaking of excitement, what's more exciting than a team who never know they're beaten? And that's exactly what Atalanta are. Kev, they went away to Fiorentina. They went 1-0 down, but as is so often the case, they turned things around and won 2-1. And a stat that came out of this game is Atalanta, since Gianpiero Gasperini has been in charge there since the beginning of the 2016-17 season, have picked up 68 points from losing positions, which is more than anyone across Europe's top 5 leagues. And if that doesn't sum up this Atalanta team, I don't know what does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not just the amount of goals they know they can score, but it's that never say die attitude, and maybe that comes from knowing that some of their football at times is so free flowing that they'll always get 1 or 2 goals. So they you don't get too down after going behind. I can't remember last week if we, just talking about Gasperini, whether we touched on him winning the Coach of the Year in Italy, which is obviously another fantastic achievement for him and the club in 2019, and fully deserved. And they're now, particularly with Roma's recent slides, looking like they're going to cement that 4th place again. Just be interesting when the Champions League starts up again, whether that takes some of their focus.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that, but they were in the Champions League group stages and they still managed to be floating around the top 4. So I don't know how much I buy into that. But Vito, they are 3 points ahead of Roma, and Roma go to Bergamo next week. That's going to be unbelievable.
Concerning the last 2 results that Roma have had in the league. I think Atalanta, they get to play Roma a game at probably the best time because Roma, they're having a bit of an injury crisis again. And Atalanta, I didn't think they were at the very best, despite making the comeback against the Viola. But they showed that even if they're not playing at the highest intensity levels, they can still play the possession football, carve out chances for themselves, and get the win. That being said, I think Ruslan Malinovsky to come on and score the goal like he did, it was a fabulous strike, and it shows that Atalanta, even if they don't have to rely on Papu Gomez or Josip Ilicic, they can rely on another player to add some extra dimensions to that team and produce a lovely goal like that.
Kev, is the biggest compliment that we can pay Atalanta that it's not surprising anymore that they're challenging for the top four. When you see them win, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that seems normal. The fact that they're now competing to finish in the Champions League places for the second time in a row, and only the second time in their history, the third time in the top four under Gasperini, it's a huge testament as to how far they've come under him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, less so the Champions League places, but just that if you make your prediction at the start of the season, you would probably 9 times out of 10 just instantly put Atalanta in the European places without really thinking about it. Then you have the discussion with yourself as to whether they will get Champions League again. But we kind of see them as this sort of side that are always going to be, while Gasperini's there, while they're still bringing the players through that are going to be hitting the top 6 places.
And one of the players they've brought through in recent years, of course, left this winter at Musa Barrow, and he's still doing business for the Bergamaschi because he put Roma to the sword on Friday evening, and Bologna went to Rome. They won 3-2. Barrow scored twice, and I mean, we touched on it, but Vito, there seem to be problems at Roma.
Oh, definitely. And probably one of the reasons for that problem is that Brian Cristante, he's been woeful since he's been put into the starting lineup for Rome in recent weeks. Personally, I do admit I don't think he is a deep-lying midfielder, and he certainly can't play as a defensive midfielder. So it was a rash challenge that he committed on Orsolini for that red card, but I think in general, just the way he gets used at Roma does not suit him at all. And I think he's a player that needs to play further up the pitch like he did at Atalanta. Another issue is that backline. Gianluca Mancini was playing well for quite a while, but he seems to be getting exposed again in defence. And Davide Santon, he's been getting chances now because Alessandro Florenzi has gone to Valencia. But in the last 2 games, I think he's been terrible at right back, and at least when Bruno Perez came on later on in the second half, at least he produced some sort of an attacking threat.
Kev, why are you laughing?
No, well, Vito got on Cristante's case again, but then I wouldn't particularly argue with Vito. I don't think he's good enough for that role. I don't think he's good enough for a side that's looking to secure Champions League football.
That's a bit harsh. I think he is in his actual position, but he's not a defensive midfielder. And I think I might have mentioned it on the podcast, but when they played here in Parma in the Coppa Italia, he was playing as a centre back. And I mean, that's not what Brian Cristante can do well. He's not a great passer of the ball to play in defensive midfield. Never mind playing it at the back and having to distribute from there. But I've actually got Alistair McKenzie, who I'm going to speak to about Roma, given he's there every week and he was there on Friday. So if you're not listening to this, if you're watching us on YouTube, go over to Spotify or wherever else you listen to podcasts and hear Alistair's thoughts on the Giallorossi. But we're going to talk about Bologna, guys, and particularly Musa Barrow. Kev, do you think Bologna under Mihajlovic is the perfect place for him to further his career?
It looked it on Friday night. He was given plenty of freedom to be creative. I've got 2 wonderful goals. Mihajlovic, obviously, he's given Orsolini a chance as well. The back end of last season, when I saw Bologna live and then sort of kept tabs on them after, it does seem like the environment where a young attacker can flourish.
Yeah, well, I do want to just err on the side of caution here and tell everyone to please calm down about Musa Barrow, because remember his emergence at Atalanta? Not at the end of last season, but at the end of the season before, I believe it was. He was scoring goals for fun, and he was scoring against everybody, but he's still very, very raw, and he's quite headless at times. He can lose his cool quite easily, and his first touch can be like a ball that's come off a trampoline. So I do think people need to calm down a little bit until we've seen this over a 6 to 9 month period from Barrow. He's got talent, he's able to finish, but please, everyone, just relax a little bit. Vito, I want to talk to you about Riccardo Orsolini, because I know you love him, and I bumped into James Horncastle at the Artemio Franchi this weekend, and we were talking about him in the context of comparing him with Federico Chiesa. And Riccardo Orsolini doesn't get the love that Chiesa does, but could you argue the case that he's done a lot more over the last season than Chiesa has?
I think in terms of goal and assists, if you look at those statistics alone, you'd have to say, yes, Orsolini does get more involved in the goals. And Orsolini, well, the funny thing is that in the Italy 9 Armenia 1 game, that last Euro 2020 qualifier, it was Orsolini who got his first Italy goal ahead of Chiesa. So that was rather hilarious when you look at it that way. But putting that aside, if you look at their importance for the two clubs, Orsolini definitely has been more involved in the goals for the Felsinei. And a guy like Orsolini has really been thriving under Mihajlovic. Not just the formation change from the 3-5-2 they had under Filippo Inzaghi last season, but Mihajlovic has this thing for developing youngsters and giving them a chance. And I think Mihajlovic has been beneficial for the development of Orsolini and giving him that confidence. I do like to think that also, at least with the way things are at Bologna, they're not as much. There's not as much pressure as there is in Florence. I think in Florence, although it's a smaller city than Bologna, but it's probably richer in history, probably from a footballing point of view. Despite not having as many Scudetti as Bologna, they're still very influential because they've had so many great players in their history. Then there was the ownership scenario from the Della Valle family to Commisso. So I think there's that desire for success, and Chiesa, as fantastic as I think he is, with his lack of involvement in goals in general, I think that probably he needs to improve in that regard, as I've said numerous times. And probably Orsolini, he's just going about his business, but I think he can really make a difference in the future for both Bologna and even for Italy, even if it's just as an impact play in the short term.
In a word, Vito, if you've got the decision to make ahead of the European Championship and you can take Chiesa or Orsolini in Italy's squad, who are you choosing?
Orsolini. And it's really just about the goals and assists. Yeah.
In a word.
Right.
No, Orsolini. Vito won me over.
Yeah, I've taken Orsolini as well, and I don't even have to think about it. And bearing in mind how much I've spoken on this podcast about how much that guy frustrates me, I don't think there's any debate between him and Chiesa. I think if Chiesa's name wasn't Chiesa, people wouldn't rate him as highly as they do, to be honest with you. But anyway, moving on. Napoli lost 3-2 against Lecce at the Stadio San Paolo. And Marco Mancosu, his goal, Kev, the free kick. Unbelievable.
Oh, wonderful. There was something about it hitting the post and going in as well. It sort of added to the the aesthetic
of it, right?
That's the one. That's the one I'm looking for. But I've been trying to get my head around this result since sort of seeing it come in on Sunday afternoon, because I only saw the highlights. I thought I sort of kind of, because Napoli have shown signs of life under Gattuso in recent weeks, I kind of thought, oh wow, okay, so it's two southern sides. Lecce will see it as a bit of a derby, and then I realised, oh, well, it was played at the San Paolo, so that wouldn't have had too much of an effect. Then you watch the highlights, and really, Napoli didn't fashion much in the way of chances by the look of how they were cut. Milik nearly misses the tap in from 2 yards, slamming it against the crossbar. And Callahan was relatively lucky. And I think if they hadn't scored those 2 goals, the score probably would have been a fair reflection on how poor Napoli were at times.
Well, they've got 2 big wins now in the last 2 weeks. They beat Torino 4-0 last time out, Lecce this is, and now they've beaten Napoli at the San Paolo. And they're just 3 points above the drop zone, Vito, but they look capable of upsetting teams. I mean, Juve kind of struggled when they went down there, didn't they? And Inter only left with a point. And Lecce, I think they've got, who is it next? Is it Udinese? I'm not quite sure, but anyway, they look like they'll be able to do enough between now and the end of the season to keep their head above water.
They've certainly bought shrewdly in the January transfer window, and I think that will help them in the long run. They did produce some surprise results in the first half of the season, but in the last 2 games, I think the new signings have really benefited the guys that are already there. Lapadula, he scored 2 goals and he earned the free kick, which Mancuso scored, and he's been there from the start of the season. But having players like Antonin Barak in the midfield controlling the play, I think he's been a big difference maker. Riccardo Saponara looks like he's been reborn by moving to Lecce. He just has the freedom to move around the ground, pass at his own pace and pick the right passes. So I think he looks much more comfortable when he's in a smaller side where people can look to him and he can feel like he's a level or 2 above the rest of his teammates, because he does make a difference linking up the midfield and attack. And also on a smaller note, late in the first half, Matteo Politano had a decent chance to score and make it 1-1. But another new signing, Giulio Donati at left back, made a crucial block on him. So I think that although the main transfer business is done in the summer, it goes to show that if you can still make some decent purchases in January, they can make a difference. And if the last 2 games are anything to go by, the Salentini have definitely done that.
Yeah, they have. They've done really well. It is SPAL they're playing the next game, so I mean, anything's possible there, especially with Luigi Di Biagio after coming in to replace Leonardo Semplici. But we'll get on to the Ferrarese in just a little bit. I've completely lost myself, but yeah, no, Genoa beat Cagliari 1-0, and Vito, I'll stick with you for this. Genoa got a win, but Cagliari they've gone really, really bad. It's just fallen apart for them.
Oh, certainly. Early on in the season, until November, they were playing some of the most exciting football in Serie A, and it looked like a few players were playing at the peak of their powers. It seemed like that also Rajanangolan had like another life in him, or you'd think he would be able to keep going as a Serie A football and really make a difference for this Sardinian side. Unfortunately for them, the high tempo and high intensity style has really worn off. And you look at them and you compare them to sides like Hellas Verona and Lecce. Those two don't really play high tempo styles, but they have that right balance. So they know when to play defensive and they know when to play attacking football. So I think those 2 teams, they know how to get that right and pick their moments. Whereas Cagliari, it seemed that they were just playing one style and one way, and it's very hard to maintain that style over the course of 38 games.
Kev, Sampdoria went up to Torino and they got a nice 3-1 win. Guess who scored?
Terrible. He should have given Ramirez the chance for a hat-trick.
We
How
discussed
selfish.
this. Goals
How
are
selfish.
his business, Kev. Goals
Yeah.
are his
Oh,
business.
no. At his age, he should have known how much taking the match ball home would have meant to Gaston Ramirez.
He got his goal, Kev. He's on 7. You've got to be nervous now. He's
No.
just banging them in. I told you after his birthday.
Banging him from the penalty spot, yeah.
They all count, don't they?
They do all count.
If he scores 15 penalties this season, it's the same to me as if he scored 15 overhead kicks, mate.
Well, we'll see if they count to 15 at the end of the campaign, won't we?
They will, because he's got 2 assists as well. So technically he's on 9 goals. So he only needs 6 more to to get to 15, because I am including assists in this. I'm sure I said that earlier on in this discussion. Quagliarella's not going to let me down. Don't you worry about that. Vito, I should congratulate you, actually, because you had a pop at Gaston Ramirez last week, and he went and scored 2 goals in response.
Yeah, I feel very thrilled about that, because I don't know if word got around or there was something in the stars or something, but after that rant last week, he just really turned it on the weekend. Sirigu denied him twice early on, but then to score 2 goals in 5 minutes and 2 lovely goals at that, especially that free kick, that was beautiful. I'm just really glad that he did turn it around, and yeah, I did it. I somehow turned it around and it worked. So I really hope he kicks on from that, because Claudio Ranieri has said a few times that he's a big believer in his talent, and that's the thing with these number 10s. The mercurial players, they can really frustrate like they did last week, but this was a really positive performance from him, and probably one of his best ever games since he's joined Sump.
Kev, SPAL looked set to get a point against Sassuolo, but Jeremy Boga popped up in the 90th minute to keep SPAL bottom of Serie A on 15 points, 7 points adrift now, and Leonardo Semplici paid for the defeat and for their form by losing his job.
Yeah, you sort of said earlier about anything can happen at SPAL, but that's the one thing that isn't happening at SPAL in the last few weeks, and the more I look at it, they can't, well, obviously they've made the change now, but they can't allow that to go on for too much longer, because that 7 points will, as soon as if they lose another game and that becomes sort of 10 points, it suddenly looks like a much bigger gap with 2 digits in the number. And I kind of fear that they'd be among my 3 to go down.
Yeah, you look at it, they've got Lecce away next week. Lecce beat them, that's it, it's 10 points. Then SPAL play Juventus. Then they've got Parma away, and Parma are quite solid this season. And I think they've got, who have they got coming up then? Napoli are coming up in the next few weeks as well. And you wouldn't be surprised to see Di Biagio get the boot after that Napoli game, with them having picked up no points from 15. And Leonardo Semplici coming back for the game against Milan in a month and masterminding a 1-0 win at the Paolo Mazza. But I don't know, Semplici gave that club so much, and it does seem like he's left on quite amicable terms. So I wouldn't rule out a comeback, and given what he gave to that club, he took them from Lega Pro to Serie A, got them finishing 13th in Serie A, and yeah, he's adored there. He's absolutely adored there, and he loves the fans as well. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see the two of those reunited in the not too distant future, be it this season, next, or a couple of years down the line. What's left? What is left? Oh, Brescia, Udinese, 1-1. Brescia are in big trouble. Vito, Eugenio Corini is gone again, sacked for the 2nd time this season, and it's not looking good.
No, it's not looking good. And Massimo Cellino, the Brescia president, has gone down the path of looking back to people that were involved at Cagliari when he was the president. He's brought in Diego Lopez, who coached Cagliari when he was the president there, and they survived relegation. So it seems that he's gone for the same method again. Will probably backfire again, though, because last season, before Corini took over, he had hired David Suazo for his first senior job, and that did not work out too well. So we'll have to just wait and see if this, creation of Cagliari 2 works out. But I think it's just another recipe for disaster.
Does seem like it's only going one way for Brescia, and that is very much the same direction as SPAL. Though I do stand by my prediction that SPAL will finish ahead of Brescia this season. I'm not quite sure if I'm as confident that they'll stay up, but I'll stick with it for now. SPAL are going to stay up. Brescia, of course, are on 16 points, so 6 points adrift of Lecce, 7 behind Sampdoria, and 9 behind Udinese. So it doesn't look too good. Guys, we've reached the end. Thank you for joining me. Everybody listening, head over to ForzaItalianFootball.com. Our match coverage is always going on. We're at games every weekend. The only Italian football podcast actually that attends games. The only Italian football podcast website that attends games. And yeah, that's not going to change next weekend either. We're always doing bits. But Kev, thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Wow, that's the kindest you've ever been to me. Vito, thanks as ever.
No worries, Connor. Anytime.
Perfect. Vito's always mannerly. That's all I have to say. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Good boy, Kev.